Okay, Taylor, let's have a look at your essay. So, first of all, having a look, the first thing I'd notice as an examiner is I'd be happy to see that you have done a nice detailed plan, shows that you've thought about your answer carefully. So anything that's good about your essay I'm going to highlight in green. The only thing I've noticed that you haven't done, which is always worthwhile, is if we look here at the question, it's always a good idea to highlight the important parts of the question. So you want to highlight how important, terror, control, and then your important dates there as well. So, having a look at the first part of your essay, your introduction. Upon Hitler's commence into power as Chancellor, he found it was an imperative that his ideologies were consumed by his public in order for him to gain control, total control. So I'm going to highlight that in blue just because I think there's probably simpler ways that you could put that introduction. The language just makes it sound a tiny bit confused, a bit too complicated. So rather you want to say something along the lines of when Hitler was coming into power as Chancellor, he found that and consumed by his public here, maybe think about revising how that sounds as well. It can be argued that his approach in coercing his public implicitly through means of terror was the most important in controlling his public as a whole. That's good. So I like that. But what mustn't be disregarded is the legalities he set in stone. Yes, I like that. The enabling law, good use of a key term there. Without this factor, terror itself and the fear it produces has no substance objective as such. For fear is just a concept, law is an imperative. I like that. That's very good, to the point, and in your introduction there, you've clearly highlighted what your answer is going to be centred around. So a nice strong start, just that first sentence that I'd think about changing. Okay, so moving on to the next part of your essay. Starts with a good connective, nevertheless. It mustn't be forgotten that fear and terror, good, you're referring to the question, in its own right was used as a great tool by the Nazis to increase the strength of their control. Again, you're referring to the question nicely there, good to see. It may also be addressed that it was terror in which was the catalyst. So that part of your sentence doesn't make sense, so revise that for me, please. In which was the catalyst for the imposing of legislation in the first place. In example, should that be for example or an example, would be the Reichstag fire in 1933. Like that, you're highlighting a key date, a key event, and a key term all in one. Was one of the first explicit examples of terror used by Hitler to have control. Probably I would say to gain control, because he didn't have any control at that point and he didn't know if it was going to work. But generally that's a good start to this part of your essay. You've made a good point. And then what follows it is some decent explanation. Hitler exploited communism. Yes, he did. Through the burning of the Reichstag building by pinning an event on communist von der Lube. When you say, so that's been rumoured, just think about what you mean there. I know what you're trying to say, but it's a bit of an abrupt end to that sentence. You might want to say something like, the effect of which was that there was a widespread rumour that a communist had started the fire, which in turn increased fear of communism in Nazi Germany, in Germany at the time. One thing before we move on that you haven't done here, which probably belongs somewhere around here in your essay, and you might have done it later on, but it just seems like it would fit nicely here, is the fact that people were fearful of communism because they were fearful of what they'd seen happen in Russia. Okay, and that would be a good place to have that link to another factor. And remember, that's where we get our higher order marks for our A stars, our A's, is linking to other factors. So just think about maybe adding something about that there. Okay, moving on. This act was integral to the enabling law being imposed in the first place, as it made the German public prefer a more conservative outlook rather than communist. Good explanation there. Though it was after the something of this law that the spiral of terror increased, propounded by, I like that, the Nazis. Although another good connective there, the powerful SS had already been present at this point. The construction of the Gestapo, probably okay just to say creation of the Gestapo, was at its very beginning. For Hitler, this doesn't quite make sense here. Oh, change that to blue. For Hitler, would keep a watchful eye. Just doesn't flow well from the last sentence, so think about how that fits in, please. On the public through the eyes of the Gestapo, who were the secret police of state, whose jobs it were to catch any blah blah blah, regardless of the political ideals and of the people who didn't approve of. Jews, disabled, those who didn't approve of Hitler. The Gestapo had the permission to... Okay, before we move on to the next page, just be mindful of the fact that this bit here is becoming a little bit descriptive. We always need to be asking ourselves, where is the link? Yeah? Where is the link to the question and this piece of writing? Okay, so just think about that. Hopefully you've done it in the next part. We'll see. Okay. More than anything, however, one of the worst parts of the Gestapo and public police was that they employed block wardens. Also, neighbourhood, probably looking for out of sorts. This alone was enough to control the people. Right, what I like about this part of your essay is that you've clearly linked it back to the question there. Okay, it was getting a little bit descriptive, but you've pulled it back and you've said, more than anything, the Gestapo were enough of a means of control. Okay, so that's great. Even if not guilty, made people the title of block warden seen as the outcast too. Some even is that had held a grudge through the system of terror. Anyone could bring anyone to the Gestapo office, and without trial, they could be sentenced to death or worse, a concentration camp. The fear of going to a place with such awful conditions, with Nazi experimental, or is that meant to be experiments there going on, was enough to make the Germans be controlled, feared. Just consider revising that sentence, it's a little confused. Rumours of death camps would have, without a doubt, have surfaced in such a fearing society. But it wasn't just the existence of Nazi Germany pushed and controlled, it was the internal party too, which increased control through terror. Good link back to the question there, well done. The Night of the Long Knives, good. Good key term there, good key event, increased Hitler's immense control, like that, as he now had full control of not only the public but his party, good. All through the infliction of fear, I like that part too. You might just want an extra bit of explanation there. So this is where the examiner would say that you have imparted knowledge, but not fully explained it. And the reason is you haven't said, well, why is that relevant to the question? What happened in the Night of the Long Knives that made it so that Hitler now had the respect of his party or the fear of his party. So just make sure that you explain that properly. Socioeconomic second revolution that surfaced from, let's continue reading. The more socialist element of national, is that socialism? Ground leader of the SA, good knowledge there. Desire to the public. This threatened Hitler's power, as if Rome were to start the second revolution, it would most likely, politically, Hitler, as SA Parliament was majority, more people in the SA than those who supported. Good use of key terms here, well done, I like all of that. So a bit of knowledge there, background knowledge. Hitler chose to commit a purge against all SA members. A sense of I'm going to need your help telling me what this bit says, so you can find me in the lesson and we'll go over that bit together. This terror act was therefore highly important as a means of control. Good. So you're linking back to the question now. As it effectively stopped the threat that lay within his party. Nobody could overtake Hitler now. Good, nice. He was unstoppable. Everyone in his party supported him, as did everyone outside of it. The terror that granted Hitler more control was Kristallnacht. Good, and I like that you've mentioned Kristallnacht. You should have. I like that you've got the date as well, and it's the fact that you've mentioned that date automatically links it back to the date in our question. So that's a good link there as well. Hitler ordered all Jewish property. All public services were ordered to watch the Jewish property burn, without a doubt, to have a better reputation in the eyes of Hitler. The public would have joined in on the burning and slander committed against the Jews. Just be careful here. Capital J for Jews, please. Ergo, love that word. Effectively, terror was important. The means of control, Nazi Germany. Good. Linking back to the question again, as it created, explanation, very good. A national fear, which made the comments of control easier. Revise that. Rise of control, something like that, but comments of control just doesn't read that well. Easier for Hitler. If you feared of consequences, if death camps, slaughter, you'll be likely to conform. Okay. Then again, so good connective there. Terror wasn't the ultimate factor in controlling. Okay, so we're getting on to some other points now of why terror wasn't the main reason for control. You cannot control everybody with fear. There is always a rebel. The enforcement of propaganda played such an immense part in controlling the nation, as it culturally coerced Germany into Hitler's ideologies, exploiting them through people's escapism, happiness, leisure, film, theatre, music, art and literature. Hitler's propaganda minister Goebbels, good knowledge there, used the arts to their own advantage, as Hitler's ideas were in a society, therefore he only displayed classics such as Shakespeare, good knowledge, most likely led to the Romanticism, Germany, to know the difference. There was no exposure, there is no free, only political drawings, statues of Greeks, leaders. Okay, again, this is all good knowledge, however, it's getting a little descriptive. So we just need to think about how am I going to link this back to the question. Let's have a look if we do it here. Became a form of entertainment. This would be enough to control, good. This would be enough to control a society, as Hitler is taking up their leisure time, his ideas. Moreover, very good connective there, the radio and newspapers controlled through mass censorship. Good. The only news was how effective Hitler was as a leader. The German public were trapped. They knew nothing other than the great Führer as a messiah figure. The use of radio politically dominated society also. Good. Okay, great link back to the question there. It was getting a little descriptive, but I think you managed to pull it back. Okay, so to begin with, nearly there. I like that you've started with therefore, because it shows that you're about to oppose your own argument. society only exposed to the greatness of a leader consistently will eventually to believe their leader to be great, leading to a mass control of Hitler fanatics. But if it wasn't for the abolition of religion in 1935, good fact, good date, this control wouldn't have been as intense. Hitler became a god. No churches, just swastikas, the Bible, Mein Kampf. So, here, what I'm going to say is avoid making sweeping statements. In an English essay, this would be really good. But in a history essay, all that they're going to say is that you've made a sweeping statement and then you haven't justified it. You've just made two really big points. Whereas this part here is really good, the fact that you've highlighted that they've abolished religion, but we want some hard facts as to what effect this had. For example, before religion was abolished, Hitler had a concordat with the Pope, which meant that he was able to come to an agreement with the Church and therefore wasn't seen as a threat to the Pope or the Church, and therefore in turn was able to secure the votes of religious people. And then by abolishing religion, it didn't really matter because he'd already secured those votes, and because of the fear people had of Hitler, they weren't going to change their mind afterwards. So just be careful to explain points when you made them. I like nevertheless, that's a very good connective. It is most argued that the way in which Hitler coordinated, great key term, his society, is what gave him more control. Again, you've linked back to the question there, which is great. Through youth camps from the age of 10 to Hitler Youth and the curriculum. Hitler brainwashed children. He controlled them or coerced them into his beliefs from a young age to become, to idolise the Führer. Yes, he did. Therefore, terror didn't even always need to be inflicted. I like that, because you're linking back to the question there. As children of the future were already... Okay, just the last page then. I've highlighted what I like in green. That you've brought in legislation, the Enabling Act, the legality side of it. I think you are on a really good path here. Basically saying that the Reichstag fire, an act of terror, was the catalyst, but actually the foundations of that control lie in the law, and the way that Hitler was able to legally impose sets of laws on people which also imparted control. So that's really good. The reason I've put in blue, and I know you spoke this to me about this in the lesson, I get where you're coming with your link to ISIS here, but actually it's too out of place and I wouldn't end on that. I see that you're making kind of a link there to modern history, but it sounded like you were flowing really, really well into this really good overall point of, no, I don't believe terror was the main factor. I think it played a big part, it contributed, but actually underlying everything, the foundation to the control Hitler had was in the laws which he legally passed, because nobody could argue with them. And then you come in with the ISIS thing and it kind of just throws you off a little bit as a reader. So I would like you to just revise the end of your essay. But overall, really good, Taylor, well done. Okay, so now the bit you really want to know, which is what kind of grade would I expect to get for this essay? So when we're marking, we always look at the assessment objective first, and basically you're only graded on assessment objective 1, which is how well can you communicate your own knowledge and understanding of key features, key events, that kind of thing. How well can you present your argument? So we always start with the middle banding, which is here. Now, generally speaking, level 3 would get you sort of a low C, high D, that kind of area. So we start by looking to see which parts of this band you've actually met. So let's have a look. The question is partially addressed. Well, what was our question? It was, how far was terror a means of maintaining control during the Nazi Party? I would definitely say that you've at least partially addressed that question. There is a demonstration of some relevant knowledge, yes, and understanding, yes. Which is evaluated and analysed in parts, yes it is. In places, knowledge is imparted rather than being used, I would say so. The analysis is appropriately linked to the judgments made, yes, mostly. Not always explicit. I've talked you through some areas where I got the point you were trying to make, but we needed a bit more evaluation there. The information has some relevance and is presented with limited structure. I would actually say you're higher than that. I would say with some structure up here. Now, I would like to give you this part here. Clearly and logically structured, but the only reason you haven't made that is because of that very last part which threw the reader off. But you definitely are up there in level 4 when it comes to your structure. I would say that you're level 4 for the way that you brought in evidence to support your answers as well. And I would go as far as saying that it's generally accurate and sometimes detailed knowledge and understanding is demonstrated, for sure. It's a good, strong essay. Now, without making the improvements I've suggested, this for me shows that you are a low level 4 because you've met most of the level 4 requirements, but with just a couple of the level 3. So generally speaking, I would probably award this somewhere in the region of 15 out of 20. So let's work out what that is as a grade. So after some quick calculations, we've worked out that 13 to 16 is in the solid B range, and you're about in the middle of there, so I would mark this essay a nice big BB. So well done. Very good, Taylor.